I'm Lynette Zang, founder and CEO of Zang Enterprises. And you know, the whole world has been depending upon the consumer to keep this whole stock market rally going and keeping everything going. But the consumer is having a lot of trouble really maintaining a reasonable standard of living with all of these inflated prices. And yet our leaders, they seem tone deaf. So let's look at what's going on with the consumer, because quite frankly, the consumer is cracking. And what does this lead to? Well, let's see, there are a whole lot more consumers than there are of the one percenters. And if our leaders seem deaf to what's really happening, I don't know, it could foretell a revolution. Well, let's just see what's going on. Because here, our Treasury Secretary, who used to be the central bank chief, echoes Powell saying labor market now less inflationary. So what they're really referring to is that the labor market is going through turmoil right now, and there's a lot more job openings that are happening, which means that the workers would be having more trouble asking for more money. What they refer to as price stability, meaning the central banks, price stability is about the worker not asking for a raise. So keeping the rate and speed of inflation at that 2% level, because they're getting the decline in the value of the dollar at that level. But consumers and workers don't see it as dramatically and therefore don't ask for more money. So yeah, good thing, labor market, because it's not all the big money that the CEOs are making, it's the labor, right? Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen dismisses the notion of sticker shock in U.S. grocery stores, despite food prices soaring by 25% since pre-COVID. And I wonder when the last time was that Janet Yellen went to the grocery store. And even if she did, would she even have an idea about what things cost? So we do know that it's the lower end consumer that has been pulling back, but there are other signs that are happening right now. And I'm telling you, if the government is deaf to what's happening with the man on the street, the woman on the street, that could lead to a revolution. I say let's make that revolution, but let it be peaceful and let it be quiet, just by converting this garbage, this fiat money, government debt-based money, into sound money, physical gold, physical silver in your possession. What a concept, boy. I don't know. But let's look at these inflation numbers that they feel, hey, we've gotten some great inflation numbers in. Well, with hedonics, they can kind of change things. One of the things that they said through June was that food is only up 2.2%. So they're getting close to that 2% target, which means, what does that mean? It means that they can drop interest rates and print. Isn't that a good thing? The markets certainly seem to like it. But let's look at that 2.2%, because all of these other things like juices and eggs and bacon and pork sausages and all these other foodstuffs that we use, well, they've certainly gone up a whole lot more than that 2.2%. But I do believe that caviar may have pulled back a little bit in price, so they take that average. And that's what they do to make things look the way they want them to look. But the problem is the consumer's still the one that's going to the grocery store. In reality, on average, 61% of Americans report spending more on groceries and dining out compared to a year ago, according to, So yeah, 61% of Americans are noticing. The other ones aren't even going out to eat. And here we are, because what they're saying is all items less that volatile and pesky, food and energy. Let's see, can you live without food or energy? That would be no. But all items less food and energy are up 3.3%, which is there, except, wow, just look at all that other stuff. Oh, video, basics, insurance, cigarettes, which you shouldn't be smoking anyway, but that's up to you. You can do what you want. Apparel, Everything up is everything else in this category is up way more than 3.3%. But good thing that food at 2.2% can pull that average down. Accept that. Elevated prices have largely persisted, which means that Americans continue to face affordability challenges on a range of things, both necessary and discretionary, including homes, vehicles, car insurance, food, electricity, and travel. We'll take the food and electricity out because you don't really need that. So what they do is they change the formulas. That's hedonics. If steak becomes too expensive, let's put in chicken. If chicken becomes too expensive, let's put in hot dogs. So they hide the true rate of inflation. But when you go to the grocery store once or twice or 3 times a week, notice the prices, especially if you're being forced to pay attention to how much money you have to use for food or the essentials. And clearly, more Americans are struggling even as inflation cools, right? It's not that inflation is being pulled back. It's that the rate and speed of inflation might be slowing down in certain areas. And how have the normal person, the man on the street, the woman on the street, been surviving? With credit cards, right? From filling up a tank of gas to making a rental payment to buying groceries, most consumers are paying more today for everyday expenses than they ever have. So is it that these things are worth that much more? Or that the purchasing power value of the dollar is worth that much less? Because every single time we hit a recession, this is what they do. They drop interest rates and they print. And that's why the markets like it, because the markets require free money. And why? Because this is a flipping con game. That's why. And every con game, every Ponzi scheme requires new money. Well, we're at the end of that because the debt market is having a structural shift. That means the ability to create more debt and the ability to support all of the debt that's already out there, it's waning. It's got some huge problems and huge cracks. And if they're using a credit card to make these purchases for their everyday goods, their interest rates are at much higher levels. So costs are also rising for those consumers carrying a balance. Let's take a look at it. Look at this balance, right? So that means that not only are they paying more when they go through those grocery store or you're buying anything, but if you use a credit card and you carry it, you're paying huge amount of interest, which even adds to those inflationary pressures. Do you see the problem? Do you see why I'm saying that consumers are cracking? Because there's only so much that anybody can absorb if their incomes do not keep pace with the level of inflation or their costs going up. And heed my words on this one. You cannot create wealth from debt. You can merely create the semblance of wealth from debt. But when people have to use debt for their everyday necessities like food and gas in their car and carry that balance, I mean, their ability to even buy these things grows less and less and less. It's a serious problem. So if the consumer is paying more in interest, how is that going to impact their ability to buy new stuff, more stuff, to keep this Ponzi scheme going? Let's take a look. Because big U.S. banks warn of stress among lower income consumers. And these are loans that are marked as unrecoverable. So here you go. Profit at Citi's U.S. consumer lending business, which includes credit cards, plunged 74% from a year ago. 74%. So this knock-on effect to the big corporations, which then will have to lay off more people, which then puts more pressure on the ability to ask for more money in jobs. I mean, isn't this a good thing? No, what it actually feeds into is a doom loop where prices are going up, people are buying less, that they have to put more on credit. What happens because the banks, well, we'll talk about that. So what you're basically looking at here is both JP Morgan, Citi, and Wells Fargo. And look at the loans marked as unrecoverable. They are growing in pretty much every single case. Uh-oh. How safe are the banks? I mean, they all just passed the stress test. We will be talking a lot more about the banks in the future. And they keep telling us that don't worry about it because after all, the well-heeled, those with money, they're not having any trouble doing it, buying and creating that support for the stocks. Following a record year, the luxury market is slowing down and here you go, restructuring. Showcasing remarkable stability in the face of geopolitical and economic turbulence. The global luxury market exceeded a record. However, the first quarter of 2024 saw a slowdown across a majority of regions, with consumers shifting their preferences toward more accessible, in other words, cheaper goods. Well, let's take a look at that a little bit more. Because the world is counting on the upper end consumer, and this is what their purchases look like. And these are all, this just happens to be luxury watches. Now remember, when we had the crypto craze and the crypto prices zooming, we had created a whole lot more millionaires that went out and bought all of these products, right? They're aspirational products, these luxury products. And so they accumulated that. But when that pattern shifted, a lot of these things came on the secondary market. I'm bringing this up specifically because this is also where the opportunity will lie if you can maintain your purchasing power. And I'm not saying rush out and buy a luxury watch at this time. They will get a whole lot cheaper. But what I am saying is all of those watches that are coming onto the secondary market, and this is true right across the board for all of these luxury goods, the more of them that come onto the secondary market, it also impacts the price in the primary market where they first produce these goods and services. And so if that all slows down, then what do you think happens to employment in all of those categories? Can you see how this just goes around and around and around? So this is really what the problem is. We are a consumer-driven economy, and the consumer is having trouble consuming. These are the write-offs. You can see it. The bank is not alone. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, and each saw net charge-offs from their credit card business soar more than 60% in the second quarter compared to a year ago. Banking giants like Citigroup tend to follow a common playbook when they start to see signs that consumers are struggling to keep up with their bills. What might that be? Well, with moves like proactive credit line decreases or shuttering unused accounts. We've been talking about the unused accounts particularly. Banks are trying to avoid becoming a customer's lender of last resort right as they're facing trouble. So we all know this. If you don't need the money, they're happy to give it to you. But if you do need the money, good luck to you. It's going to be a big problem. And these write-offs are happening right across the banks at all of these big banks. So you better become your own central banker. This is what I personally use for my savings account. It is a pre-33 coin because I think it gives me more protection in the case of an overt, if there should be an overt confiscation, and we'll be talking more about this in the future. So I like this to hold my purchasing power. And part of the sound money strategy is to have a little bit of not such sound money in there. In other words, some cash in there as your first line of defense. This is your second line of defense, right? Your emergency savings and your barterable position. We've got to make sure that we become our own central banks, because clearly if you are dependent on banks when you need the money the most, you're not getting it. It is really that simple. So what happens? I've said this so many times that when the crisis really hits, things get very, very local. And I'm pretty sure that you've noticed when you've gone into a pharmacy or you've gone into a grocery store that there are more and more things being held behind locks, right? Locked up. So when laundry detergent becomes currency, the alarming sign of America's economic decline, because people can't afford it. The economic strain is further evidenced by the response of stores which have begun implementing anti-theft measures such as electronic tags. CVS pharmacies in the Washington, D.C. area, for instance, have been attaching these tags to their Tide bottles. Why? Because people are stealing them. When people are hungry and hopeless, they make choices they would not otherwise make. Thieves often remove the tags with wire cutters, making off with the goods. This persistence in theft points to a deeper economic malaise and the lengths to which people will go to make ends meet. And we are just at the start of this. And you need to really be clear on where we are in this trend cycle, because it's going to get much, they don't have any choice. You know, the debt market, the structure, and I will be doing a piece on that for next week's video, so you're not going to want to miss that, and I better mark it down. I have it pulled up, I just haven't gotten to it, but I'm going to just make a little note here. Because the structure of the bond market has shifted. That's what supports currencies. What supports them? The full faith and credit of the government will translate that. As long as you trust them, you have confidence in them, you have faith in them, then you will continue to extend them credit, loan them money. So what supports this garbage is the government's ability to create more debt. And you know what the problem with that is that we have global central banks that have been monetizing the debt of the governments. In other words, buying the debt that the governments issue. Why? Because there are not enough buyers out there of the debt. Unless you think that this is something that's brand new, heck no. The Federal Reserve first bought the debt of the U.S. government back in, I think it was 99 or 2000. So they didn't talk about it then because that's what a third world country does. But now everybody's doing it. And then magically it became like a great thing. Yeah, it's not such a great thing. But it does, this persistence in theft to necessities, basic things that people need, points to a deeper economic malaise. Yep, indeed. And it shows that the consumer is continuing to crack, not just at the lower levels of income, which, by the way, saw the fastest rise in income over the last 3-4 years. But it still wasn't enough to keep pace with inflation. And the problem for governments and central banks is when there's rapid inflation, people can see it, people notice it. But the government seems so deaf to what's actually happening. Well, this is not really a good thing, isn't it? Because again, that's what leads to revolution. And you don't want to miss this next video, which I'm recording these on Tuesday, so I'm not quite sure when this is going out, to be honest with you. But I did a piece for this week on the growing revolution because it's happening. It was happening prior to the Cerveza attack back in 2020. That Cerveza attack squelched that, but it's growing again. You need to know what's going on. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and help support this channel. Leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up, and share. And don't forget to watch the most recent video that I did on China's banking system, because we're doing the same thing. One thing that frankly blows my mind is how we always point fingers and say, oh, look at what they're doing here. Look at what they're doing here. Look at what they're doing there. Look in the mirror. The U.S. needs to look in the mirror because frankly, that is the same everywhere. And if you're ready, and you should be ready, everybody should have a sound money strategy as the foundation to go through this global currency financial system reset. So just click that link below, set a time with one of our strategy specialists, and because really, frankly, having the right kind of gold and silver, I mean, there's all different kinds. What do you need? How much of it do you need? Well, let's put your goals first. Let's have you make educated choices that, oh my goodness, actually puts your best interest first. That's what we do at Zang Enterprises because, quite frankly, we work for you. That's who we work for. Now, I know without a doubt in my mind that together we can make a positive difference for a lot of people. So come and join this global community. Do it locally so that you can always get the food and everything else that you need for a day-to-day basis, but do it globally too. Because if we don't have a seat at the table in this new monetary system, it's going to be even worse. It will be a full surveillance system, and you're going to have to, unless you have physical gold and silver outside of the system, you're not going to have a whole lot of choices. You will lose your freedoms. Let's maintain our freedom together, have a seat at the table, and make a positive difference for a lot of people. So until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.